through the tears, she finally said to me, she said, Mr. Shane, thank you for this $10,000 check. It may not be a lot of money to a lot of people, but to me, it allows me not to have to ask my family, my friends, or my church for the money that I need to give my son the decency he deserves. So thank you for being in the insurance business and helping me keep my dignity. And that was something that changed my life.
Hello and welcome to Pathways E3, a special edition of Pathways with Amber Stitt. The Pathways E3 podcasts were recorded with special guests who were attending and collaborating at the NAIFA E3 Conference in Newport Beach, California in September 2025. Let's join the conversation. So we are live from NAIFA E3, and we have Shane here as our first podcast guest. Welcome, Shane.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And we grabbed you before you're on main stage twice this week, which is probably to be expected with your extensive history in leadership. And I thought for the first podcast episode, it'd be great to talk about legacy. And I think you're the guy for the job. Giving you a little context that growing up in the business, my father does a lot of succession planning for business owners, and myself now closer to 50 than 40. I have a lot of friends that have been talking about it. And I know that you help others and kind of mentor and really think about that. But I feel like times have changed a bit. And I was really curious to see, is the legacy planning getting harder, or is it a little different than it ever was before?
That's a great question. Yeah. I think over the 35 years of my career, I've seen the evolution of solo practitioner starting in the business. Back when I was brought in the business, I think the industry for the most part was, you're in business for yourself, maybe not by yourself, but you're trying to build a practice that is rollable, sellable, transferable in later years. The vision for most, I think, were to maybe bring family members in, doing something for their children that they could have kind of a small business, if you will, mentality, entrepreneurial. And the industry is I think it changed for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think the industry today is so broad and vast in product and knowledge. It's not like you come in and you go sell 100 of one particular thing. It's like you have to learn the smorgasbord right from the beginning, because that's what consumers expect. The second part of that, I think also people are more diverse now geographically. And so it's not like you're just serving people in your geographic area, your town, or your metropolitan area. It could be multiple states, over multiple states. And then I think the third part of that also is we're all living longer. And so back 30 years ago, even life expectancy was probably, late 60s, maybe 70s. Now it's pushing 80. I think we're, moving towards it's going to be 90 to 100. So part of what I'm noticing in the legacy planning is they don't want to quit. It's like, why do I need to get out? It's not a physical job. We're not hanging on telephone poles or digging ditches or farming, fields anymore. So as long as they're intellectually able to keep up with the business, a lot of people don't really want to totally get out because they enjoy it. They enjoy the social aspect of the industry.
Yeah, I think that's where I was really going with it, because we go to conferences, we see our friends, and we have friends that are on stage, leader conferences. And that's kind of where I was going, is like the identity of us and the attaboys or girls, kind of that it's fun to work so hard to go, we made it, and we're all seeing each other for the greater good and having that collaboration. I was curious if there's like a point where you talk with people or about, or even think for yourself that there should be a point to really start transitioning out. Do you think it's smart for a person to find more identity outside of the business before it's too late, or are there no rules on that?
Well, that's a great question. Along that line is, a great question would be is, well, if you weren't getting paid for it, what would you do with your time? Like, what would you like to do with the hours that you're not getting paid for? And if they don't have an outside hobby, an outside interest, like this is their career, it's what they get up and do every day. It is their identity. As you said, a lot of times it's kind of like, if I don't come into the office, then where's my identity?
Yeah.
Where am I going to go? So I think part of that is finding in life something that's more meaningful. What's your legacy? Why are you doing it? What is your end plan, if you will? In the sense of just because you start to hand off the business to someone else doesn't necessarily mean you have to disappear.
Yeah.
We've got story after story where we've helped people where we said, look, why don't you let us buy a piece of your business so that you can take some money off of the table and begin to enjoy life along the way. In order to do that, you also have to be able to give up to go up. So you have to have something in place to where you have staff or other people or other advisors that are in your practice that you can say, look, it's okay for me to take 2 weeks, go travel Europe and enjoy the career and the money that I have. Can you do that? And that's where I think that crossroads hits is I see people in their 60s, even 70s, mid 70s now that are like, I've never had a vacation for 50 years. This is what I've done.
Yeah.
My vacations were around conferences or going to meetings.
Well, there's a write-off there. So I suppose that could be smart. But at some point, what else is there?
And it's having something else in life. And, part of that is just because you hand it off to someone else, or maybe you sell some or all of your practice, maybe you don't get out of the business. Maybe you become the rainmaker. Maybe you're the one that becomes known in the community that you can go still have those lunches and coffees and hang out at the country club and enjoy referring people back to the firm so that others can do it.
Yeah. All right. So going back in time, I heard that it's possible you were in a completely different profession before this one. How did you bridge that? How did that come about for you? Can you share what you were doing prior to industry?
Yeah. So I went to school. I was athletic. And of course, for those of you that, know something about me, those of you that don't, you'll learn. But I was in sports, very athletic, was ran the mile and was qualified for the Junior Olympics and then the U.S. Olympic team back in the late 70s, early 80s. And we ended up boycotting the Olympics. And I was at the university and enjoying life, wanted to go into corporate law, fashion design before that was popular. And
wow,
the downside of that was my girlfriend ended up getting pregnant and I ended up dropping out of school second year in college to start to raise a family. And so I didn't have a lot of options. I grew up in a very rural area. Those of you that have heard my talk in the past may know some of these details, but I grew up in a township of about 800 adults. A grade school, first grade through eighth grade was about 200 of us total. And so it was a very small, very rural area. And my outlook on life at that time was I was either going to end up in a factory somewhere becoming a machinist or working on the farm. And so I didn't want to do either of those. So I really wanted to get off into college and make something of myself. That didn't turn out. So I became a cable lineman. I did that for 8 years. And then my father had been in sales off and on throughout his career of various things. And I went to him one day and said, how do I get into sales and what else could I consider? And he said, you might want to try the insurance business. I think you'd be really good at it. So I tried it, ended up selling $5,000, $10,000 policies door to door in the inner city of St. Louis, Missouri. And that's how I started in my career.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Pathways. Please consider giving us a like and subscribing to the channel. Your support goes a long way towards helping us bring you more compelling content. Remember, let's take action together. Now let's jump back into the conversation. Okay, so can you give me top of mind a story that was just like you're in someone's house, you're so nervous? Do you have any of those that were just like that one time?
I was nervous every day. I'm down in the inner city, people on welfare and government aid and having to sell $5,000, $10,000 life insurance policies and then going back every month to collect that premium to make sure that they didn't lapse. And about 3 months in to my career, I had to deliver my first $10,000 death claim check to a mother who had lost her 7-year-old son in a drive-by shooting.
Oh, goodness.
And we sat there, we reminisced, and she told a lot of stories. Of course, through the tears, she finally said to me, she said, Mr. Shane, thank you for this $10,000 check. It may not be a lot of money to a lot of people, but to me, it allows me not to have to ask my family, my friends, or my church for the money that I need to give my son the decency he deserves. So thank you for being in the insurance business and helping me keep my dignity. And that was something that changed my life. To think about a $10,000 death claim check after you had just lost a 7-year-old child, and the thing that's out on your mind is the dignity that you can provide for your son, to give them the decency they deserve. And from that point forward, I began to look at insurance totally different. We plan for the expected, we insure against the unexpected, but we're in a profession where when everybody else is asking for money to repair your car, money to repair your house, money for your healthcare needs, money for, final expenses, we're in an industry where we're bringing people checks. We're providing them the opportunity to keep their dignity when it matters most.
Thank you for sharing that. Taking that further as a younger person, we talked about legacy on one side of things, but we also need to pull in new talent to keep this going. It's so important. What would you share with a younger person, someone new to NAIFA perhaps, that they're not so sure about getting into the business?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Getting into the business is not as easy as it used to be. Of course, it was never really easy, but
it was harder to go into the door to door. I was like,
absolutely, yeah. Or sitting out at fairs, collecting names and then calling them afterwards and so on. I think today, if you take a different approach, think about it as a profession, because it is a profession. It's just as important as being an attorney, a doctor, an accountant. I mean, those are all professions that are right in line with what we do. And that's providing people a service that they don't necessarily enjoy paying for. But I've never had anybody hand me a check back and said, hey, this is too much life insurance. Why don't you take half this check back? Like, they value it when it matters most. We have to take pride in that we're there to help them discover that need and understand that need. So I look at it more as an education, more than selling of a product. Mm-hmm. And if you ask people, like, what do you want to do when you retire or when you no longer need to work because you've acquired enough wealth that you don't have to work anymore? What would you do? Or what would you do in the event your home burned down in a California fire or a hurricane in the East Coast? What would you do? Are you in a position that money is no longer a necessity? Like, you're not afraid, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, money doesn't necessarily bring us happiness, but it sure does solve a lot of problems.
Okay, so trick question for you. If you had to pick between building wealth or building a legacy, what are you going to pick?
Building a legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a trick question, not for me.
No.
Building a legacy because, I look at it this way. We have 4 questions that I typically will ask a client when I'm sitting with them. And that is, I'm in the business of taking the if out of life. There's 4 ifs that you need to address and think about regardless of your age. Number 1 is, what if you live? Do you have the wealth that you need to live the life you want to live the way you want to live it without financial stress? What if you linger, become sick, hurt, or disabled? How are you going to pay for that? Are you going to be able to get the care that you want, the care that you deserve, the care that you desire in order to keep your dignity? What if you leave through death or divorce? Will the assets transfer the way you want them to transfer to whom you want them to transfer? And the last question is, to your point, what's your legacy? We're all going to leave one by default or by design. I propose that we should do it by design. The legacy is how we're known. The legacy is what we can leave. There's 2 things that I probably will never see, and that is a U-Haul behind the hearse at a funeral with all the possessions of the person in the hearse, or a banker coming up to the coffin and putting all the money of the person in the coffin for them to take with them. So I have a phrase that I've said for many years now. I said, everything that we acquire on this planet, whether it be wealth or possessions, we're not taking with us, so you might as well learn to enjoy them while you're here.
I like that. Okay, so some of the listeners to the podcast are with us and some are listening after the fact. So if we're going to wrap up today, is there anything you want to share that's just like an absolute action item? And maybe we could talk to 2 people, maybe the person coming into the business and then the person maybe leaving the business. Are there any actionable items that you want them to think about from this episode?
Yeah, I think the person coming into the business, look at it with pride. Be excited about coming into this business because it's a profession that is absolutely needed. It's one that probably has not gotten the respect, if you will, that other professions have gotten through universities. And that is changing, which is a good thing. But again, we're in a profession that we can change people's lives with the stroke of an ink pen. We can bring them money on 10 cents on the dollar. Give me a dime, I'll give you $1 when it matters most. I mean, there's so many things that we can do to impactfully change people's lives. And as you grow in the profession and you start to acquire a little bit more and more success, think about the philanthropy, the charity, the give back that you can do in the community, that you live. And for those that are leaving the business, I would say, have a plan. Make sure that your business is set up to where there's operating systems in place. There's people around you that you trust, and learn to give up so that you can go up and then start to enjoy life, and then reach down and pull someone else up in this industry. You mentioned this earlier in this broadcast that there's not enough young people coming in the business. And I think part of that is because those that have been in the business a long time have stopped reaching down and pulling someone else up and helping be a mentor and train others. And we need to get back to that. And I'm speaking, to my peers and people like myself that have been in the business for 30 plus years to say, what is our give back? Where can we reach down and pull someone else up in the industry?
It's interesting because we can come to conferences, but I was going to say to Jason, the E4, the 4th element could be execution. So how do we keep the mentorship going? It's really reciprocated.
Yeah, the mentorship is key. And it's a unique industry, but if we bring back that pride, we bring back that excitement, and we start bringing young people to conferences to hear what we do and how we change lives. And, Life Happens, a great program that's available for the general public out there. And those in the industry should know it. The stories that we hear through that are tear-jerking, they're heart-wrenching, and that is what we do. And it's been that way for hundreds of years. One last thing I'll share with you. Sure. I heard recently, I'm dating myself now, but Paul Harvey was a guy that I grew up with. My dad made me listen to it all the time. And he's a guy that always says, now the rest of the story. And I'll keep this short, but he shared a story where he said there was this general that after they came back from the Civil War, packed in his back in his saddlebag, rode his horse fort to fort to fort with enough food to get him from one fort to the next and a bunch of life insurance policies in his backpack. And when he got there, he insisted that every general and every soldier write a life insurance policy on themselves. And of course, he got a lot of resistance, but he finally found one particular general that said, yes, I believe I should do that, even though I don't have any children, I don't have any family. I do understand the importance of leaving some money behind to create a legacy. And he insisted that every one of the soldiers that served under him also take out a life insurance policy.
Wow.
The rest of the story is that was Colonel Custard who wrote that life policy and insisted that his entire troop write life policies. And that became iconic in our industry.
That's really neat. I've never heard that. Thank you for sharing that. And thanks for being live at E3 with us. Really appreciate it, Shane.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Perfect.
Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Pathways E3, recorded at the NAIFA E3 Conference in Newport Beach, California. Join us for more insightful conversations with the experts and leaders of their industries. Until next time, keep taking action on your unique path.